Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm not going to do a long intro today. We're just going to dive right into it. So, we have Shannon and Titania here with us today. I'm sure you guys are familiar with both of them because the both of them have been on our podcast before. And we also did a personal statement episode with Shannon. So, if you want to go get some neat tricks, strategies from there, just go and watch her episode. But today we're going to be focusing on supplemental essays.
I'm going to give everybody a little bit of an overview of like why we picked these schools, what we're going to do with this so that we can kind of like have our objectives clear and in place, both for you, but mostly for me and Titania. Okay. So the first thing, we're kind of doing this in the hopes that we highlight the importance of supplementals. I know that a lot of people are in the final runway to a lot of their applications and are really stressed about a lot of this stuff. So while we encourage your personal statement obviously needs to be strong and represent you and your voice very well, the supplements are the most important essays for any individual school. So I do want to make sure that you're paying enough attention and care to approaching those prompts.
That being said, there are so many different types of supplements that all the different schools have. Some schools have short essays, some schools have long essays, some schools have essays that ask you about experiences or thoughts or like opinions. But the thing I mostly want to say, and the thing that we all want to get across, is that do not panic. You're doing great. You're going to get through this application season. So the reason that we picked Harvard, Yale, and Johns Hopkins is because they cover the whole spectrum of the questions that can be asked by schools, mostly. Harvard has 5 questions that are all sort of short answers. Yale has a couple of very short answers and then some longer answers. And then Johns Hopkins just has one long form answer question.
So I want to start, I think, with Harvard. Again, I know that these are some of the most high profile schools, but in a lot of cases, especially in this case, these are prompts that you're going to see a lot of different places. So it's the same type of thinking, it's the same type of topics, it's the same type of prompts that you're going to see for a lot of your other schools. So I think it's a very kind of useful school to take a look at. And so I want to kind of go through, and there are a couple of things that I want to talk about for each school. First and foremost, we want to break down the prompts. We want to kind of work on how to read a prompt, understand what it's asking, both in order to help you brainstorm your correct or most effective topic for that, but also to check yourself in your revision. Am I answering the question? Am I addressing the kind of level of thought and precision about myself that the school is looking for? Especially in kind of like, how do I work with that within the word count limitations for each essay and each school? Second thing is going to be a little bit of balancing the aspects of your application. So for schools like Harvard, where you have 5 different essay prompts in addition to the Common App portion, so in addition to the personal statement, you have a lot of different opportunities to represent different parts. And one of the things that you need to be thinking about for yourself is, how do I distribute the different elements of my, what we would call persona, but basically your profile and your personality, so that Harvard gets not a complete picture. No 5 essays are going to give a complete picture, but are going to give a fuller picture of who you are and what you're going to bring. And then part of what we're going to do as we go through this is help you learn how to kind of categorize an essay to understand, like, where is this similar to some of the other essays I have to write elsewhere, but also what makes this particular to Harvard and how I answer it. So like, how do you customize and adapt ideas and essays to the specific schools you're looking at?
Just as a general rule, try to reuse as much writing as you can, not only because it lets you save your time, but it also lets you spend more time on polishing each essay and customizing the parts that do need to be customized for each school.
Okay, so let's just start. I'm going to read it out loud, but I believe it'll flash up on the screen for you so you can follow along. So Harvard has long recognized the importance of enrolling a student body with a diversity of perspectives and experiences. How will the life experiences that shaped who you are today enable you to contribute to Harvard? There are a couple of keywords in this that I want you to recognize as a way to compare different prompts across schools. The first one is, this is a life experiences or a lived experiences essay. This is extremely popular as a prompt. It has gotten more and more popular over the last couple of years. So you will be writing other essays like this, and you probably have topics that you'll want to apply. The other idea is that this idea of a diversity of perspectives and experiences. Lived experiences essays are at their core a type of diversity essay, but it is thinking about diversity in a more nuanced and complicated way than what demographic box do you tick on a census survey.
Mhm.
This is about thinking about diversity in terms of context and the way that contributes to a community. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about how I would suggest approaching this, and then I'm going to kind of turn it over to Titania. Obviously, feel free to chime in if you want to talk or contribute. When you're thinking about prompts for this or topics for this, I always encourage students to think about your context. Fundamentally, this is an essay about you reflecting on the context you come from. None of us come out of a void, right? We are all shaped by where we come from, the people around us, the communities we belong to, which might be ethnic or cultural or religious, but they might also be hobbies or like schools of intellectual thought or philosophies. They also can be kind of geographic and places, but like we all come from somewhere. This is about identifying one of those details about where you come from and the experiences that you have had, reflecting on how has the life experiences that have shaped who you are today. So how has this thing shaped who I am today? And then how does that perspective or idea or experience bring something kind of new and interesting to Harvard that is going to contribute to a community of students that comes from everywhere in all types of contexts? So you might talk about a kind of classic demographic. So part of your lived experience might be an ethnicity experience, or if you're belonging to an ethnic community or country or nationality, or a language community in some cases. It might be a religious community. It might be like a kind of sexual or gender or identity kind of experience or community. Like all of those definitely could work here, but it is not required that way. I, for instance, if I, at my definitely no longer applying to college age, but if I were to think back on like my own kind of high school experience, I would probably talk about being from the Appalachian Mountains. That is a context that Harvard isn't getting a lot of. That is a perspective and an experience that when I'm sitting in a Harvard classroom is not going to be shared by a lot of the other people there, and has insights into like how the world works or how other people think about the world that is unconventional, at least within a Harvard classroom. And part of that will be, how has this shaped me? How has this shaped my identity? Probably my kind of fierce independence, my slight mistrust of authority, my mind your own business, but I'll stand up for your ability to have your own business minded too. That kind of, I don't know, counterculture vibe that comes from being from a place where people have been there 200 years or moved in the 60s as river hippies. It's a very specific kind of place in life. And so again, it's about context. That's my context. And so when you're thinking about topics, you want to think about what aspects of my life and the experiences I have had and the communities I belong to and the way I identify and think about myself have been most important to me. How have they shaped me? And how is that going to bring something interesting and valuable to the classrooms and community at Harvard? And those are the two parts of this essay. So, well, kind of three parts. Identify the thing. What is the context you're talking about? How has that shaped who you are today and what your perspective is? So what was the experience? How has it shaped your perspective? And then finally, how will that contribute to the classrooms and community at Harvard? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me, all of that advice is incredible, as expected from Shannon. The only thing I would add is that you may not have this kind of experience, a personal experience that is in line necessarily with what you would expect from the community that you're in. I'm Vietnamese, but I do not particularly identify very much with a Vietnamese culture. But that in and of itself is very interesting, right? That is a perspective that I have and a context that I have, but these two don't necessarily align with each other. That's actually what I ended up talking in the essay that I wrote that was sort of about this, which is my ability to understand the context that I'm in and also understand that my perspective within that context is a little bit different maybe than what you might expect. So, for example, right, if you're from the Appalachian Mountains, but you don't necessarily feel like your personality aligns with the Appalachian Mountains, that is also a really interesting context and life experience that you bring. So it's important to recognize that your lived experience is your personal lived experience within the context that you're in. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are the context that you're in, which is sort of like a weird nuance, but I think it's important to kind of recognize you and yourself, because ultimately all of these essays are meant to let the admissions officers, who are actual real human people, by the way, they want to read these essays and imagine, who are you? Who is this person? And so the more that you're able to kind of access, who am I? What makes me the person that I am? And how do I feel like I stand out within the places and contexts and things that I am in? You could be something that aligns with it. It could be something that doesn't quite align with it. But those both are very valid ways to approach this life experiences question.
I'll also say with that, I think that is arguably more true the more selective the school is in terms of the reflection. So not that you need to surprise your reader with every essay. That's not how this works. But being able to point out, like, this was my experience and this is how it shaped me. And here's kind of maybe how it wasn't how I or you might expect, and why that difference gives me an interesting perspective that helps me connect with people and provide perspective at Harvard. Part of what I kind of big pictured with mine as well, but like part of what the deal in the mountains is, you have a lot of very different kind of ideologies existing in a kind of narrow space. Like, how do the river hippies get on with the kind of like old mountain folk who've been there forever? And like, how does that give you an idea about like how to coexist with people who feel very different than you do? For this kind of thinking about this kind of idea of ethnic identity and like whether that applies to what your experience of that culture is, like how does that understanding of your own identity and your experience give you a way of thinking about or reflecting on conversations and topics or discussions of identity at Harvard and the way that other people might experience that? So how does your understanding of yourself help contribute both to bringing something new to Harvard, but also cultivating a kind of ability to empathize and converse and connect with others as part of that, as contributing to that community? So the more thoughtful and insightful you can be about yourself and the way that you have been shaped by your community often gives you a more interesting place to then reflect on how and why it's important that you bring that perspective to the school, whether that's Harvard or a different school with a similar question. When you're talking about 150 words, that's not actually all that many sentences. You don't actually have a whole lot of space to do this, but you do need clear sentences in each phase of that question. What was my experience? A description kind of component. What is this? What does it look like? Bring your reader a little bit into your world with a couple of vivid details. A couple of sentences, in particular, one that states very clearly how it has shaped you and why that is important to you. And then a final kind of component is like, why does it matter to the other people in the Harvard community that you bring that experience there? Like, why is that a valuable contribution and make you a kind of compelling addition to the campus and community there?
Incredible answer. And I guess one thing that I would also add about just about all of these is that if you have time, I would strongly recommend that you write and then cut. Don't try to edit as you write, because you're going to leave stuff out. You're going to limit the way you think. You can just go over the word limit and then cut down to the bare essentials of what you're trying to say.
Compress. It's the way.
Compress.
Build it out, get the ideas in, compress down to word count. Build out the ideas, compress down to word count. Like, that's kind of how the revision goes, especially for some of these shorter length, kind of mid-length essays.
Yes. Can I read the next one?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. Describe a time when you strongly disagreed with someone about an idea or an issue. How did you communicate or engage with this person? What did you learn from this experience? This is a pretty common essay question, or somewhat common.
Yeah, it's more popular now than it was a couple of years ago.
I wonder why.
I do think that this is a question that has become more popular as it is perceived by colleges, at least, and I think this is not unreasonable, that discussions and conversation has become more polarized, and there is a need to show that you can meaningfully have discussions about difficult and sensitive questions or ideas or topics or issues in a way that is not exclusively like hostile. You don't have to agree. You don't need to change your mind. You don't need to change the other person's mind, but you have to be able to like connect, You
Mhm.
have to be able to have a discussion and to learn something and understand better at the end of the discussion than you did at the beginning. Obviously, I have lots of ideas about this, but I want to give Titania a chance to kind of like get your teeth into this. So, do you want to
Mhm.
take this one first?
Sure. I think that probably one of the things that is hard to balance is figuring out a time that you strongly disagreed with someone that also doesn't make you look super aggressive or polarizing. As Shannon said, you don't need to come to common ground or anything, but you do need to be able to recognize that the other person is a person. And those are really hard to do if in discussions over the internet, as I'm sure you all know. So if you can think about times in your real life where you've talked with someone or talked with someone you care about, those are pretty good places to start. I think this is an essay question that is definitely a bit challenging. I know how I would answer it, and I know how I would maybe chat with some of my students about it. But Shannon, what are your thoughts about it?
It is extremely challenging. And I think correctly, students feel like they're walking on eggshells with it. I think that is a reflection of the climate, but that is also the motivation for including it.
Mhm.
Colleges want to see that you are mature in your thinking about this, but also that you recognize that it's important to do.
Mhm.
So I agree that you don't want to come across as hostile or too polarizing. However, if you come off as evasive and unwilling to engage with something meaningful to you, that
Mhm.
is also failing the question. So the error that I see in most of my own students is that they pick something that is an intellectual debate style question and not something that they are personally, emotionally invested in. So they're like,
Mhm.
we discussed this policy question, but neither of us had particular emotional investment in the answer.
Mhm.
And so I always encourage my students like, this is an uncomfortable question. And if you pick a time or a disagreement or a discussion or a conversation in which you were not uncomfortable, you are missing the point. And that is hard. That is both
Mhm.
hard because it was uncomfortable then, and it's probably going to be uncomfortable to write about and think
Mhm.
about again. But that's kind of the task at hand. And if you're
Mhm.
too comfortable, again, they're missing an opportunity to show them something more.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that now that I'm thinking about it, you don't necessarily have to come out as like the perfect person at the end of this. I think
Correct.
that it's also very illustrative to come out recognizing that you maybe communicated in a way that wasn't perfect, but in a way that shows that you have learned from that experience. Maybe you were hostile, right? But maybe in like afterwards you realized, wow, that was not cool of me to do. I would like to change that. Or maybe I was evasive at the time, but I would have preferred to speak up more strongly. I think the something that's very important in a lot of these is it's important to be more human than it is to be perfect. And humans make
Show
mistakes.
growth and show
Yeah.
growth with that. Like this is an opportunity to say again and to show maturity in your self-reflection. I think those moves, maturely reflecting on the experience you just had and understanding yourself better, and then learning and growing in a way that gives you tools that will make you better at it the next time you have an opportunity. That's, I think, primarily what they're going for here. Don't aim for perfection. I mean, it's not like I left that and I handled it perfectly, nailed it,
Right, right, right.
right? Got it. That's not what they're looking for here. If you're thinking about things or topics or ideas to help prompt your thinking, I actually do encourage you to use your emotions as a way to tap into the best opportunities or the best topic choices. When did you have a conversation or a disagreement that you were emotional about?
Mm. Like
Because
when
a
you
big
mattered.
part of that reflection is like, why was I emotional? What is it about my experience or my perspective or my engagement with this that inspired that reaction? And how do I understand myself better if I understand that emotional reaction? And then now that I understand that, how can I see that someone else might have reasonably disagreed with me or thought something different? And
Mhm.
how then do I want to handle that in the future? That is
I
a
think
lot for 150 words. But I think, just like we said on the last one, it's worth building out the whole experience and compressing it down to the essentials than it is trying to cram and revise as you go to fit it all into 150.
this is a chance to show that you care about things. And that is another thing that colleges are looking for. They're looking for real people who care about things. And by missing the opportunity to show that, you were emotional and you cared about this thing. You're missing that opportunity to show that you have passion. This is another way for you to show that, like, you believe deeply in things, which is more rare than you might think. You just have to get more in touch with how you feel about things. And then in terms of like a practical writing thing, something I've noticed that people tend to get a little bit floral with their writing. Try to keep your writing as simple as you can. Simple, not necessarily meaning really short sentences that are just subject, verb, object, but try to keep your words relatively small but direct. You want to be more direct with your writing to more clearly get across what you need to say.
I would also say with that, the other thing with that directness is also making sure and double checking yourself that you're using some of the vocabulary from the prompt itself in the way that you answer the question. And that can be a really good way to help you stay on topic, especially when you have a topic kind of like this one where there's the temptation to wander. And so making sure like you go back to the prompt, you figure out like, where have I answered the question directly? Where have I picked up on some of the vocabulary and keywords of the prompt and like incorporated those into how I'm thinking about my answer?
The trick that I learned from Shannon was actually go to the question, highlight what the question actually is, and then go into your essay and highlight where you actually answered it. Check yourself before you wreck yourself, or something like that. I think a wise philosopher once said, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, it's in 2015. Okay. All right. Anyway, with that one, I think the most important, again, it is uncomfortable. That is going to be a hard essay to write. Recognize and acknowledge before you start it that that is going to be a hard essay to write, but tackle it as a hard essay to write and try not to polish yourself into perfection. That is not what this is. Again, maturity of reflection and understanding yourself, and tools for approaching it, like in terms of what you learned, growth and tools for like how you would hope to do this in the future, or how you hope to, again, represent what you care about and value, but in a way that is productive and thoughtful and recognizes your disagreeing or party or opposition as a person with their own experiences and perspective. All right, third essay. Man, we're just plowing through these. Briefly describe any of your extracurricular activities, employment experience, travel, or family responsibilities that have shaped who you are. So this one is actually your freest of free cards in the Harvard application in terms of like topic choices. For a lot of my students, this is a what have I not talked about, but I feel like I want to for Harvard, or what do I want them to see that I haven't had a chance to talk about yet? For nearly all of them, and for you too, I strongly recommend activity rather than the others, unless your particular circumstances warrant additional commentary in one of these other places. Family responsibilities. So, for example, if you are in a family situation in which you have real adult, meaningful responsibilities that have shaped and complicated your life in some way, but that also you think has been a significant factor in shaping your perspective, that might be a place to do that. I will say that is not the case for the vast majority of students. Everyone's got family circumstances and everyone's got responsibilities in their family. That's everyone does. For most students, that is not the most productive thing for you to focus on here.
I would say, though, that there are quite a few people who maybe don't think that applies to, that it does apply to. For instance, translating for a family member, like your parents who maybe don't speak English. That is actually a fairly large family responsibility that if you grew up in a household that doesn't speak English might seem fairly routine. Something like caretaking of sick or disabled family member relatives. Those are also things that may sometimes feel ordinary when you're in them, but are certainly family responsibilities that you can talk about here.
My only counter to that is that there are places in the Common App for that type of like information. Fundamentally, this essay is about reflection on shaping who you are rather than information about your circumstances. If the purpose of what you're talking about with your family responsibilities or other types of like kind of those types of family circumstances, if it is informational, this is something that is true of my circumstances and this is how it has affected my opportunities or progress or whatever in high school for my extracurriculars or schoolwork, that belongs in some of the essays in the Common App. If you want to talk about it as this is an experience that I have had related to that, and how it has reflect on that in terms of how that has shaped you, this is that essay. So fundamentally, this is a reflective essay, not an informational one.
I was going to say, would you say that pretty much all these supplemental essays are generally going to be reflective essays?
I would say vast majority,
Mhm.
80% plus. I do think that some of the Y schools, I think that's a separate type of category of essay. It should still include personality and like what you're contributing, but it's not reflection in terms of these are my experiences and this is what I have learned about myself because of them. We're going to get to it in just a minute, but like the kind of 3 things your roommate might want to know about you. Like, I think that that's a kind of different quality than a reflective essay, which is like looking at your experiences and reflecting on how those have shaped you. So I think that's a slightly different approach to the question, but I would say probably of your total number of essays, 75 or 80% of them in terms of your supplements are going to be reflective fundamentally.
Like that's generally been my experience as well. And so I really do want to emphasize the fact or the idea that if you're just sharing information, you're not using these essays to their fullest extent. They want to see that you have self-awareness, that you have thought about who you are and how you interact with the world and your existence and like place in the world. Just an awareness of your individual perspective and experience and how that not only informs you, but also informs the way that you participate in the world.
So with this essay specifically, for Harvard specifically, this is the only place in the application where it's more or less required that you focus on your actions. You personally, and thinking about your topic, you might have a different kind of set of priorities. So for example, if your personal statement is very action driven, like this is what I did, bam, it provides a lot of that insight into like how you get things done, how you show leadership, how you work with others, that kind of thing. This is if that is not, and your personal statement is more reflective or has a different kind of vibe to it, this is the place in your Harvard application. And for most essays that are fundamentally asking about an activity, show what you do. It needs to be very action driven, show how you like, I see a thing and this is what I do to address that thing. This is what I have done. And then in your last sentence or two, reflect on how those experiences, again, have shaped who you are. Right. So really for this one, my strong recommendation, both for Harvard, but also for nearly every school that has what I would classify as an extracurricular activity essay, focus on what you do, action words, impact, that kind of thing. And then with this one and some others, if it asks you specifically about like reflecting on how it has shaped who you are, do that primarily in your conclusion. How has this experience adjusted your perspective? But I do think that like for a school that I think values leadership, impact, like work in a community, that kind of thing, this really is one of the fewer places in the application for you to really highlight those features of your high school experience. So take advantage. And again, plug holes, see what you're missing. And chances are you have an activity in your activities list that definitely warrants additional attention and reflection. This is the place to talk about that.
Amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
No notes. Perfection.
No notes. All right. You want to take the next one?
I do. So number 4, classic. How do you hope to use your Harvard education in the future? And this is a why Harvard essay, but also not really, because it's got a little bit of a different flavor, I would say.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm going to go back to what I just said about Harvard being a kind of leader, like looking for leaders, looking for people who are going to make an impact. This is the most clear place in the application that this is how they think about students. You are future big deals in whatever field you're in. And this is your place to kind of make your case for like how you want to be a big deal and why Harvard's the place to go to help you get there. So my advice, again, to everybody, no matter what your field, no matter what your area of interest, start with your goals. What do you want to do in the future that is going to change or revolutionize or reshape whatever your field is? That sounds big and bold and ambitious, and it should be big and bold and ambitious because this is Harvard, and that's what Harvard graduates do. They're future presidents or CEOs or like cancer researchers, and like they're not all in like STEM and politics and whatever. How are you going to change the world as an art curator or a museum person? Like, what is your vision? Show that you have vision. And quite honestly, this is Harvard. You should sound a little arrogant about it. Not obnoxiously arrogant, charmingly arrogant. Have some swagger. right? Be bold in how you frame what you want to achieve.
Right.
And like think big, show vision, and then kind of like highlight that at the top. This is what I'm going to do in the world. That's your
Mhm.
future. And then the rest of the essay is largely like very kind of similar to a why school in that you do need to do the school research on Harvard. You need those details. You need to show how the specific experiences and resources and opportunities and life at Harvard is the right place to make that happen. How are you going to utilize Harvard's substantial resources and networks and opportunities to be the big deal that you want to be? And again, bold and big and ambitious in a kind of charming and big-hearted way that's going to make a difference in the community and in your field, whatever that is, with the background of the details about the school.
Yes. So, in terms of the kind of bigness and the boldness that you need to hit, it's important to be confident and to come across as confident. And sometimes confidence can feel like arrogance, but like Shannon said, be arrogant but charmingly. This is the space where you specifically need to talk yourself up a little. And some people are better than doing that than others, but you've got a lot to brag about. Do it. It's okay. In fact, it is encouraged because otherwise people don't know what you've done. So, if you've got a brag sheet, list it here. And then the other thing I'd say is that when you're talking about how you would use the Harvard part of it when you're doing your school research, like Shannon said, you're going to want to be specific. My general litmus test for when you mention a part of a college is, can I insert the name of any other college into that spot and would it make just as much sense? So don't say, oh, I would like to use Harvard's many resources.
Yeah, but that's the idea. Name things that if you typed them into Google would only result you Harvard. And I would expect even in a 150-word essay where you have to highlight your goals and your vision at the beginning, you're still looking at least 4 to 6 Harvard-specific named details that you want to at least feature and mention in your essay, whatever your field is. So if you're a creative writer, what are those resources? If you're a future like music producer, what are those resources? If you're a future kind of
Biochemist.
or educator, or like whatever it is you want to be and whatever your vision is for yourself, again, in the biggest and dreamiest kind of part of your brain, what are the specific resources at Harvard that are going to help you do that? And how are you going to use them? How is that part of your plan to become what you want to become and to be who you want to be?
They can be professors, but they don't only have to be classes and professors. They're institutes, extracurriculars, even campus traditions, things like that. The more specific, the better. And as long as they have a real, clear connection to the things that you have stated in your entire application that you want to achieve. So something more along the lines of, I would like to take this class with this professor because this professor studies this, which is relevant to my interests in this, and not, I would like to take this class because it is required for the major that I'm interested in.
I think the big difference with the Harvard than other traditional Y schools is that thinking framework of your future. This idea of what does your future look like? That is kind of particular to Harvard in the way that they frame that in terms of the tone and shape of the essay. That's your biggest difference. Everything else needs to follow the rules of Y schools. They need to be exceptionally well researched. The details you choose need to be both particular and unique to Harvard and to yourself, and kind of showing how you'll use them and how that's part of that bigger picture you have for yourself.
And I think this is something that we probably, thinking about the personality of each school is really important when you're writing these supplements. Because Harvard is a place that imagines big, bright futures. And so they want future leaders in literally every field that they can manage it. And so how are you planning on being a leader in whatever field you envision? That's what you have to show to Harvard, which is genuinely not always the case for like other schools, or at least not in this very open and arrogant (light) way.
Yeah. Swagger. We'll go with
Swagger. We'll go with swagger. The Harvard swagger.
The Harvard swagger. All right. And then the last of the Harvard essays is kind of like an unconventional essay. It doesn't have an essay structure, but it's basically top 3 things your roommates might like to know about you. This is ripped off from Stanford. Let's not beat around the bush there. But I think in terms of its job and your overall application, everywhere you want your personality and your values and your character to kind of be underscore what you're saying. Like that is a kind of foundation to the way you think about reflection in yourself and all of that kind of thing. This is the place where you make your personality and what you do and kind of your quirks and your interests at the front of the essay. What is it about you that is the coolest stuff? What is the stuff that you do that is like weird and quirky and you have no necessarily other reason to include it on your application, but like it's cool and people might like to know about it? This is kind of a version of a kind of icebreaker style. What's something that everybody might like to know about you kind of thing, which is always boring and awful when you have to do them, but you get an opportunity to think about it. If you were meeting a bunch of people your age, what are the stories and details about yourself you'd let them know about? Did you go skydiving in New Zealand? Have you felted like the entire cast of The Good Place and have it on your display on your mantle or whatever? What are the weird things about you that make you you? This is where to do that. This is also the best part of your application to really like make your reader want follow-up questions. This is like if you have 3 things to say about yourself that is you are trying to make your application readers want to meet you. This is your chance to win them over. And this is not, therefore, bragging about your accomplishments. I don't care about your accomplishments unless your accomplishments is a felted cast of The Good Place, right? So like, this is not about highlighting all of those things you think fancy Harvard wants to hear about. This is like weird, quirky stuff that makes you cool or nerdy or like whatever it is you are. Like highlight that stuff. The more filled with personality, the weirder, the more memorable, but the more true to who you are, the better. That's what you're aiming for here. No accomplishments. If it is an achievement of any variety,
Not here.
Not here. Not here. Other places. You have the honors list. You have other places in the application to deal with that. This should be fun for you and your reader.
I think you sound like you're having so much fun when you say that. Fun! Also, the felting the entire cast of The Good Place is such a specific pull that I really wonder if you or somebody you know has done this.
I have not, but I want to see it.
Okay.
Like, this is what I want. I also want my woodworker. I want that student who's just like, I have made a cabinet. It's like, this is the place for that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, maybe you like binged the entire top 100 of the like BFI top film list, or you like whatever. Like, what's the you stuff? Like you love, and it shows me who you are and what you are in like kind of like casual life.
Exactly. That's the thing about this question, I think that's really important to think about is who are you when you're not trying to be your accomplishments? Like you are a person and your reader is also a person. And this is the precise thing, like, and your roommate's also people, as it turns out, fun fact. This is the precise place where you can express that behind all of your accomplishments, right? Which you've got on your honors list, you've got in some of your short answers. You're also like a person who exists and has fun and is a chill hang. So,
or not chill. Either way.
Or is because I think you can definitely go like the super weird route. I think the more important thing for me, and maybe this is just my perspective on it, is this is a place where you show that you have personality, right? And that you care about things. So maybe it's not as grand as like skydiving in New Zealand or like watching every single one of the BFI top 100 films. Like those are pretty big like projects, but maybe it's that you have baked an entire wedding cake, or
that sounds like a bigger project.
Yeah, than watching a bunch of movies?
Well, certainly than jumping out of an airplane.
Okay, well, no, jumping out of an airplane sounds like an experience and a very scary one at that. Which, you know,
I take it over a wedding cake.
Okay, also where you and I differ, but
that's kind of personality. That's
exactly
right. Like one person bakes a wedding cake, one person jumps out of an airplane, and like the opportunity of this question is that you get to show all of that cool stuff about yourself. Whether that's again chill and meticulous, and I like doing this crafting meticulous ways about this thing, or I like to jump out of airplanes. Whatever it is
Or
that's you,
yeah.
is what this needs to be. And I would say the other thing with this one is don't ask your parents, ask your friends.
Yeah.
What do your friends think is cool about you? Not your teachers, not your parents, not anyone who is impressed by your achievements. Your friends who hang out with you because they like who you are, not because you get good grades or win competitions. See what those little things are. Highlight your personality. Sound like yourself. Connect to your reader. Share something that's going to make them want to say, like, I want to meet this kid, because that's how you win advocates in an admissions office. They remember you.
The job of an
Um,
admissions officer and the job of your application when an admissions officer is reading it, and I think I've already said this, but I'll say it again because I really like to say it. They are reading your application and trying to imagine you in their college. So, who is this person? And like the stronger an image they have of you as a full, complete person who's someone they would like to know or maybe someone they'd like to meet, the stronger that image is in their head of who that is, the more likely it is that, yeah, they'll fight for you in the admissions office because that's what happens. Like people are bringing all of these candidates to the table and saying, "Hey, I think this person would be a great fit for this school. I think this person maybe wouldn't fit in our school." So, how do you create that bond with someone you have never seen? You put all of the charm and the personality into your essays. That's pretty much where it lands.
all right. So that's Harvard.
So that's
Take it
Harvard.
from them. That's
Yeah.
Harvard. But that is also, again, the challenge of the kind of shorter reflective essays. Those are extremely common. Again, you'll use most of them in other schools that you are likely applying to, but they are in some ways more straightforward and direct about what they're asking you. You still have to have something thoughtful and insightful to say about yourself in every case, but again, more direct about the types of questions that they're asking.